Prominent No campaigner Warren Mundine is no stranger to the media, and it's become fairly standard to see him interviewed whenever Australia Day nears. Warren has said and written a lot of things about Australia Day over the years. He's said and written so many things it's probably hard to keep track of just where he stands on January 26. So here's some of Warren Mundine on Australia Day.
If we don't change the date of Australia Day, will we ever end the arguments around Australia Day?
It's an annual thing. I'm on public record. I've written about this. I've spoken about this in speeches, and that I'm a change the date guy. Right? So I'd like to see the date changed.
For Indigenous people, for the majority of Indigenous people, is Australia Day offensive?
No. I was up in Kununurra in about 2017, and I was with about 20 Aboriginals there, and I'm getting sick and tired of getting the media ringing you say, what about Australia? So don't take my word here. And I gave it to them, and when it come back to me, the ABC person went, that was interesting, they seemed to support it. And I said, yeah, it's only you stupid mob in bloody Melbourne and Sydney are the ignorant ones. The rest of us love this country.
This is the questions you come up with?
If you're saying the majority of Indigenous people don't have a problem with Australia Day at all, where's the push to ban it really coming from?
Well, it's coming from those losers, those haters who were in the Yes campaign. These haters.
Now might be a good time to take a look at this article Warren Mundine wrote for the Daily Telegraph back in 2017. The headline really speaks for itself. We must stop celebrating Australia Day on January 26. Can't say that I've seen him roll that one out on one of his many Sky News spots. Australia Day must be moved, says Warren. Warren writes, Indigenous people overwhelmingly feel anger, sadness and grief about the chain of events on January 26, 1788. That was when our ancestors began losing their lands and their ability to speak their languages, practice ceremony and live under their kinship systems. And we, their descendants, lost our birthright.
If you're saying the majority of Indigenous people don't have a problem with Australia Day at all...
Mundine goes on to write, most Indigenous people will never celebrate January 26. That doesn't mean Indigenous people won't celebrate Australia, quite the opposite. In case you weren't sure where Mundine stood on Australia Day, he writes, the 26th of January is the wrong day to celebrate Australia Day. In case you thought the whole issue with 26th of January was a recent thing cooked up by dirty lefties, Warren Mundine clears that up for you as well by saying, this isn't a recent tension drummed up by lefties. It's always been there, even before anyone cared about what Indigenous people think. And then Warren Mundine ends with this. The sentiments expressed on Australia Day are good, and they're sentiments most Indigenous people share, but we can't celebrate unity on a day representing conflict and conquest. I want Australia Day moved, not because I don't want to celebrate Australia, but because I do. It's a surprisingly sensible article, actually. It's hard to reconcile any of that with some of his more recent Sky News gear.
Those losers, those haters who were in the Yes campaign, these haters.
You know what I can tell you in the Aboriginal community? We're sick of talking about Australia Day. We are sick to death of talking about Australia Day. And all these white people out there, this makes me laugh, who say, oh, we feel, you're triggered. And I said, yes, we are triggered. We're triggered, bloody sick and tired of talking about it. I'm sick and tired of this argument. I've seen that joke about May the 8th and stuff. I'm actually starting to like it. I'm starting to like that we should do that, because one thing, it's funny. The other thing too, it starts to bring us together.
This nonsense that you people carry on with.
January 26 marks the day the colony began. You've argued many times, Warren Mundine, that we need to change the date of Australia Day. You've said it's a day of invasion, a disastrous defining moment for Indigenous people, that it represents conflict and conquest. Is January 26 a symbol of that negative impact of colonisation?
Only if we let it be. January 26th is always going to be an important day because of the fact that Europeans come to Australia and set up the colonies here. We can't get away from that, but we can't become captive of it. We've got to face the facts that we've got to move on from that. Yes, recognise that history, yes, recognise that invasion, recognise the good and the bad that's in our history, but we still got to move on.
Do you still want to change the date?
Yeah, I'm a change the date person,
Why?
but I come up with a bad idea. I said the 1st of January is the foundation date of our nation in 1901. But being a good Aussie, I like my public holidays. I don't want to lose
Fair
one.
enough.
But the problem
why do you want to change the date?
The problem because we're going through this parental, annual argument, which is not helping us. We're just arguing about this.
Yeah, the No campaign's hopping into the idea of The Voice saying they'll want to change the date. You're one of the leading No campaigners. You want to change the date.
Yeah, that's correct.
Here's a much younger Warren Mundine talking about the bicentennial in 1988.
The thing that we've got to look at is the celebration. What is this, the bicentenary? What are we actually celebrating? And the bicentenary is celebrating 200 years of European occupation of Aboriginal land. Now that's what we should be looking at, and that's what we should be directing our questions at. Should Aboriginal people be celebrating 200 years occupation of Aboriginal land, or should we be trying to stop it, which is going to be pretty hard because the ball's already rolling, or should we be out on the streets being vocal and telling the world, look, we're not going to put up with, the last 200 years we've been copping here, we're not going to put up with it anymore. And as far as I'm concerned, any Aboriginal that gets out there and accepts money that's been put out as a package for this bicentenary is actually accepting blood money. As you can see, we talk about the past is still with us.
How things have changed, huh?
So when it comes to Australia Day, you'll have to forgive me for finding it a little bit difficult to understand just where Warren Mundine stands.